When the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is finally written, I think that 2014 will be considered the pinnacle moment in the MCU. Firstly, 2014 was the year that Marvel released Guardians of the Galaxy, the underrated sleeper film that turned out to be a totally unexpected hit, full of memorable, lovable characters and quotable quotes. As if that wasn't enough though, 2014 also turned out to be the year that Marvel gave us the finest piece of filmmaking they have released to date, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Just like Guardians of the Galaxy, this was also a film that shattered expectations. While Captain America: The First Avenger had been an enjoyable cinematic outing, there was nothing to indicate that its sequel would end up becoming Marvel's version of The Dark Knight. Watching Captain America: The Winter Soldier again the other night, I realised just how good it is and how nothing Marvel has released since or before even comes close to the near perfection that this movie represents. So here's 5 reasons why I think that this movie is the pinnacle of superhero filmmaking from the Marvel machine. Number 1, Captain America: The Winter Soldier has, by far, the best action set pieces of any Marvel movie. There's the ship rescue at the start of the film, the Nick Fury assassination attempt, and the Winter Soldier reveal battle, just to name but 3. What makes these action sequences so good is the fact that none of them feel bloated, the choreography is exciting but not excessive, and the cinematography is so spot on that you never once find yourself wondering what is happening on screen at any given moment. Contrast this with Captain America: Civil War, where some of those action sequences felt overblown and they are often shot and edited in such a way as to make them more confusing than coherent. While they've all been highly competent and perfectly serviceable, none of the action sequences Marvel has produced before or since The Winter Soldier have the same excitement or technical excellence of the ones found in this film. And that excitement hasn't dulled with the passing of time or all of the subsequent viewings I've had either. Number 2, they got the CG just right in this film. To be fair, this film doesn't feature a lot of the hugely CG-dependent Marvel characters, which definitely gave it an advantage in this regard. However, even taking that fact into account, Captain America: The Winter Soldier still uses computer graphics in such a way as to ensure that they serve the story and that their presence is never a distraction that pulls us out of the film. Number 3, this is easily the best writing of any Marvel movie to date. Despite the fact that Captain America: The Winter Soldier is 2 hours and 16 minutes long, making it their 5th longest movie to be released as of May 2018, not once do you ever feel the runtime of this film. Your attention is captured for the full 2¼ hours, from the opening scene to the closing credits, and that's all down to the great writing. The obvious sign of this is the fact that the pacing of this film is pitch perfect. Not once do the breaks come screeching on so it can become an expositional talk fest. Sadly, apart from Avengers: Infinity War, the exact opposite is true of Marvel's other big tent movies like The Avengers Assemble, Captain America: Civil War, and The Avengers: Age of Ultron. The writing in Winter Soldier is excellent. The characters experience meaningful arcs and development, and things only really happen on screen either to advance the plot or to develop the characters, and as a result, the film never drags. The biggest credit to the writing of this movie, and something that its successor, Captain America: Civil War, failed to do, is the fact that the central premise makes perfect sense. The idea of Hydra secretly infiltrating and taking complete control of S.H.I.E.L.D. is audacious to say the least, yet it actually makes perfect sense in the context of this movie. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of Captain America: Civil War. Just like The Winter Soldier, I watched that film again earlier this week as well, and the central premise that is supposed to drive the plot of Civil War is still just as baffling to me as it was when I first went to see that film in the cinemas. No matter how you try and spin it, unintended and unwanted collateral damage just doesn't make much sense as a motivation for either the events of the story or for the personal character drama of Civil War. If saving the lives of the entire human race comes at the cost of a much, much smaller number of lives being unintentionally lost, and also some unintentional property damage, do we really believe that any serious superhero would be conflicted enough over this point to start a civil war with their fellow team members? It just doesn't make any sense that this would be a possible source of conflict when the alternative to unintended collateral damage would involve the deaths of tens of thousands, millions, or even billions of innocent human lives. And nor does it make much sense for the world governments to be particularly bothered about unintentional collateral damage either, when this has been a long-standing outcome of conventional human warfare for decades now. Not only that, but surely the UN is far more vulnerable to being infiltrated by Hydra than even S.H.I.E.L.D. was. Yet despite this fact, Civil War wants us to accept the idea that the Avengers would be willing to place themselves at the beck and call of such a Hydra-vulnerable organisation after their own agency, S.H.I.E.L.D., had only just recently been crippled by an attempted Hydra coup itself. And just to add to the flaws in this writing device, when you stop and think about it, Captain America's arguments in Civil War against submitting the Avengers to the dictates of the UN are an absolute no-brainer. It seems so totally contradictory that characters like Tony Stark, who has spent most of his career selling arms and seeing the seedy underbelly of various government foreign agendas firsthand, would suddenly be the cheerleader for submitting all of the advanced weapons technology and superpowers they possess to the authority of a collection of world governments. But even more importantly than any of those factors, there is also one other large and totally insurmountable flaw with the central premise of the Civil War story. Making yourself subject to the dictates of the United Nations won't actually stop a single incident of collateral damage from ever taking place. The only difference would be that the UN was now sending the Avengers out on missions, and every time those missions involved collateral damage, which would still continue to happen, the Avengers could theoretically pass the blame up the food chain to the leaders at the United Nations. But people would still be dead, and property would still be destroyed every time they had to save the world from some evil threat or other. What this means is that this whole plot device of submitting to the United Nations wouldn't solve the very problem it is supposed to fix, and therefore it is completely pointless, and the dramatic tension that Civil War is trying to elicit from it is practically non-existent. In fact, with every subsequent viewing of that movie, I have found that whole collateral damage plot to be even more frustrating and destructive to the storytelling logic of Civil War. But in comparison, this is where the writing of Captain America the Winter Soldier really shines, because the central premise of that movie actually makes perfect sense. Not only does it make sense in The Winter Soldier, but when you stop and think about it, it would also have been a far more logical jumping off point to spark the dramatic tension in Civil War than a ginned up plot about collateral damage was. Surely it would make much more sense for the United Nations to be concerned about the safety of the world after the integrity of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers had seemingly been so easily breached. Remember, the attempted coup in The Winter Soldier had come within mere seconds of causing the murder of untold human beings around the globe and leaving Hydra effectively in control of the planet. Surely this would be a far more likely reason for the United Nations to be demanding greater accountability and control of the Avengers in Civil War. It would also seem to offer better motivations for Tony Stark to be in favour of this idea. Considering his family's long history and up-close involvement in the battle against Hydra, surely he would be the ideal character to be swayed by the belief that the Hydra threat was now so serious that it warranted UN intervention. If you throw in a bit of new intelligence that raised serious questions about what Nick Fury knew and whether he could have acted years earlier to defeat the Hydra coup, and you've got all the ingredients you need to motivate Tony Stark to become strongly in favour of this course of action. Look, I'm getting off topic here, but you get the point. The writing in Captain America the Winter Soldier was so good that it actually does a better job of making the Avengers a threat to world peace, leaving our heroes facing an uncertain future, and creating the perfect motivation for a civil war amongst the Avengers than what the actual movie that was supposed to do all those things actually managed to do. Number 4, in Captain America the Winter Soldier, the stakes feel real. This has always been the problem for Marvel, or any other franchise or movie involving superheroes for that matter. How do you make the stakes feel real when your story is about virtuous, superpowered individuals who can single-handedly save the world? And how do you make those stakes feel real for someone like Captain America when he always has the option of calling on the rest of the Avengers to come to his aid and defeat his opponents? The answer is that you make the threat about more than just physical prowess or who has the most superpowers. In this case, there is a vast and potentially world-ending conspiracy where the good guys and bad guys don't become clearly visible for who they truly are until the final act of the film. With this as your story underpinning, there's no real point in calling up the Avengers for help because they can't add anything meaningful that will aid our hero in his quest for victory. Of course, he still possesses a super strength of his own, so how do you nullify that part of the equation and bring dramatic tension to the story? Well, you introduce the character of the Winter Soldier, a villain who shares Captain America's super strength and can easily nullify his extraordinary physical abilities. And to make the stakes even more complex, he is actually Bucky, the man who was formerly Captain America's best friend and brother-in-arms. Oh, and up until the point he reappears in this film, everyone, including Cap and us, the audience, had believed that he had been dead for decades. All of this dramatic tension culminates in the final act of the film when Hydra enacts their deadly plan to take control of the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarriers to kill untold human beings around the world. Unlike most other movies of this sort, including Marvel ones, the dramatic tension is still palpable in the final climax of the film. Hydra's plan for global mass murder goes right down to the wire, and they are stopped with literally just seconds left to spare. The thing is that even though the ticking doomsday clock is a well-worn cinematic cliche, the tension and drama is still there at the climax of The Winter Soldier. Even now, years and multiple viewings later, you still find yourself holding your breath and hoping that Steve Rogers manages to get that last circuit board in place before Hydra manages to activate their nefarious plan to slaughter countless human beings around the planet. It's no mean feat when a superhero film manages to make the stakes feel this real, and it's even more impressive when those stakes still feel just as real with many subsequent viewings of the movie. Number 5, Captain America the Winter Soldier contains another one of Marvel's brilliant casting decisions. Just like the choice to cast Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, or Chris Pratt as Peter Quill, I think that the decision to hire Robert Redford to play Alexander Pierce was another one of Marvel's casting home runs. The role wouldn't have been much of a challenge for Redford, and it's definitely not Oscar-level stuff, but at the same time, Redford is a pitch-perfect fit for this role. Just like Anthony Hopkins, he's the sort of actor who can elevate a mundane role like this to something that exudes gravitas and importance just because he is the one playing the character. In this case, Redford isn't merely the sort of actor who feels like someone pretending to be the US Secretary of Defense, he actually feels like a US Secretary of Defense who happens to be in a Marvel movie. Aside from being an actor who has the whole political shtick so nailed down that he actually looks and sounds like a seasoned US politician, he also brought another really important trait to the role of Alexander Pierce. That ability to play the fair-weathered friend with such proficiency that we, the audience, aren't sure of his motivations and his role in all of this until the moment he is actually revealed to be the arch-villain. Most other actors would not only have felt like actors playing a dramatic role, but they probably would have also inadvertently given the game away a lot earlier in the film. But because Redford is one of those actors who keeps the villain more grounded, instead of playing him as a maniacal mustachio twirler, he can always keep you wondering. So there you have it, 5 reasons why I think that Captain America, the Winter Soldier, by a long shot, is the best movie that Marvel has released to date. The obvious question that arises from all of this is whether they will ever be able to produce another film that manages to top Winter Soldier, or whether, just like The Dark Knight, these types of superhero movie-making brilliance are so rare that they only come around every once in a while, so it's best to just enjoy them without any future expectations when they do. As per usual, I'd love to know your thoughts, so please let me know in the comments section below whether you agree or disagree. Right now, it's a pretty tough time for us YouTube content creators, so if you like the videos I'm producing and you'd like to see more of them, then please support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. There's a link in the description below and a link on screen at the end of this video. A huge thank you to all of the people named on screen right now. Your generous support for my channel over the past month is hugely appreciated. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.